Hey everybody, welcome back to The Point. I'm your host, Noah Warren. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. I know I did. Lots to talk about today. Lots of NFL. We got some NHL storylines, the chaos. They love to make it interesting for us out there in Vancouver, so I'll have some interesting thoughts on what's happening out there. We got UFC 283. Surprisingly interesting pay-per-view Saturday night, so I want to get into that. Just some winners, losers there, and general feel from the event, which I felt had a few rough moments that should be addressed within the UFC. And yeah, so I hope you guys all had a great weekend. I'm back. Another snowstorm here. Again, the winter in New Brunswick, the winter, I think in general, unless you live in Buffalo, New York, has been pretty good. I will always complain about weather because it's my favorite thing to complain about. I love warmth. I love nice weather, snowing, rain. It's all crap. But I don't want to complain the whole time here today. So let's move on to something else. Let's move on to this weekend in the NFL. And there are a lot of winners and there are a lot of losers. But overall, before I dive into all four games, I'm going to say this off the top. I believe that the four best teams remaining are playing. The Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, San Francisco 49ers, and the Philadelphia Eagles are the four best teams in the NFL, and then the four best teams playing in championship weekend. And that's really all you can hope for. Now, if you're a fan of a team, I get it. You're upset. You wish your team was there if we had our quarterback, if this player was healthy, yada, 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 yada. Dolphins, if we had Tua, if we had this, you wouldn't have beat those teams. The four best teams are left. The two best quarterbacks in the sport are left. And then you also have Jalen Hurts and the crazy story with Brock Purdy, a.k.a. Purdy Good, as we call him on this show. That is all you can hope for when you're watching. And I think we're going to have a great championship weekend. But, it's so chalk to start by talking about the Dallas Cowboys. But let's be chalk. I'm not a chalk show. I don't like to start talking about all the big teams. But let's do it today. It's a Monday. Why not? Because I had a feeling yesterday. I picked San Francisco and Kansas City to make the Super Bowl before the season started. Boy, it would be great if I was right. Becoming less and less confident about that as the games go on. But it'd be nice to be right about that. But I thought before kickoff yesterday, I had a feeling that the Dallas Cowboys were going to win the game. I don't know why. I thought they played great on Monday night. Yes, it's a short week, travel, all the reasons why they shouldn't win the game. I understand that. But I just looked at it and said, Dallas is going to win. Dallas has a really good running attack. Dak's playing well. Their defense is on the same level as San Francisco's. And quite frankly, Dak is a more proven quarterback than Brock Purdy, obviously. I just had this feeling about the game. Dan Quinn versus Kyle Shanahan. They were together in Atlanta where they choked away that Super Bowl. They have history. Dallas lost to them last year. Maybe they get some revenge, even though I believe San Francisco has the most talented roster in the NFL. But then we get to the game, and, it's an old cliche. Sometimes the cliches are just true. The Cowboys did cowboy things. The Dallas Cowboys just couldn't get out of their own way. And oddly enough, I think it exposed something that we already knew, but it became even more prevalent on the big stage. Without an elite running attack, Dak Prescott is a below-average quarterback. You think to Dallas's reign with Dak Prescott at quarterback. His best seasons were 2016, this season, and 2 years ago when they won their division and made it to the divisional round. 2016, they had the best record in football, and they went 12-4. They lost to Green Bay in that ever so close playoff game, but it came down to the bitter end. Dak was a rookie. Zeke Elliott was a rookie. What happened that year? Zeke Elliott led the NFL in rushing yards. He ran for over 1,800. He ran for over 20 touchdowns. And they had the best running attack in football. Dak could use that play action. Dak had a great rookie season. His second year, they missed the playoffs. What happened that year? Oh, yeah, Zeke missed 6 games. He was suspended for domestic violence. The next year, they make the playoffs. They win their division. Zeke leads the NFL in rushing. You see the pattern. Zeke has gotten older. He's not the back he used to be. But what Dallas had this season was this guy named Tony Pollard, who quietly ran for over 1,000 yards. Tony Pollard, who's a threat in the running game and the passing game. He's Christian McCaffrey, but he's on a Dallas uniform. They're the same player. They run between the tackles. They're not that big. They're explosive. That's what they bring to the table. But when the Dallas Cowboys are so reliant on one side of that football, one side of the offense being passing, and your running game is completely a non-factor, they are not going to win many games. They'll beat the bad teams. They'll run over Houston. They'll eke out a win against a run-of-the-mill club that doesn't have a good quarterback. Sure, like any other team will. But when they have to go up against the cream of the crop, when they have to play a really good team, they fail. They failed last year with porn star Jimmy as the quarterback. They failed this year playing against Brock Purdy. Sure, they beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a feel-good story. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a crap football team. They have an old man at quarterback and Tom Brady. Their defense is washed up, and they just fired their offensive coordinator 2 days after losing. That's what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were. They were flawed. They won. They made the playoffs because their division is an eyesore. And you look at Dallas, they got a good team. But I look at that game last night, it's 9-9. They're very much in the game. They got the ball to start the second half. They get a turnover. They got to feel good about themselves. But to me, I look at the Tony Pollard injury. It killed them. It sunk the game. They never had a chance after that. Because Zeke was doing nothing. Zeke dropped 3 balls in the passing game last night. He was awful. He was hardly playable in that game last night. But no Tony Pollard. We find out after the game he broke his leg. Just a nasty-looking injury, which it turned out to be. So he's got a broken leg. The team's going nowhere fast. Dalton Schultz is not getting his feet in bounds. CeeDee Lamb's the only person that Dak will throw the ball to. It's just a flat-out fucking disaster. Not to mention the play calling. If I'm looking at that and I'm a team with a head coaching opening, Kellen Moore isn't screaming to me, yeah, let's hire this guy. But you lose the game. You take the L. You got to move on. I get it. But if I'm Dallas, you got Zeke, who you overpaid for. He's a beat-up running back that you should cut this offseason. Take that dead cap, whatever you have to do with it. He's not a good player anymore. Tony Pollard's a free agent. Paying running backs after their second contract, scary stuff. Look at Zeke. He's coming off a broken leg. Do you want to give him a whole bunch of money guaranteed to come in and be a running back? He might not be as good as he used to be. There's this thing called the draft. You still got picks you can find. But to me, with Dakota Rain Prescott at quarterback and the way their offense is currently constructed, they are not going to win unless they have an elite rushing attack. Elite. Not somewhat good. They need a complete balance. It needs to be 30 runs, 30 passes for them to win consistently, for them to be a threat, for them to be even considered a team that could compete for a Super Bowl. It has to be 50-50 right down the middle. Because looking at the game yesterday, that Dallas Cowboy defense could not have played any better. Micah Parsons played like an all-pro, like a Hall of Famer yesterday. He was all over the football. They put him in coverage. He played awesome. My guy, Dorrance Armstrong, sack and a half. Great game. DeMarcus Lawrence was beat up. He still played well in the O-line. Trayvon Diggs didn't make any big mistakes. That's all you can ask for from him. Sure, they made a couple stupid mistakes hitting guys out of bounds. That's going to happen. But that Dallas defense did what they had to do. They allowed one true drive that sunk the team, but it didn't because, yes, they allowed a touchdown drive to Elijah Mitchell to Christian McCaffrey ended up being on that drive. But guess what? Next drive out, they get a stop, meaning Dallas would get the ball back with over 2 minutes. But what happens with 2 minutes and 30 seconds? They don't run enough plays to even get to the 2-minute warning. They have a 3-and-out in seemingly under 10 seconds, but then the last play is inbound, so they don't kick it off until the 2-minute warning. Greg Olson did a great job of pointing this out on the broadcast. Clock management, getting plays out there, it was not, a tough stretch for Mike McCarthy in that moment. But that Tony Pollard injury, I believe, changed the game. Because San Francisco wasn't getting much on offense. They were getting stopped in the red zone. Dak had thrown 2 interceptions, and they were able to survive them. Brock Purdy played okay. Again, they kept McCaffrey to a low roar. Deebo Samuel didn't have a huge game. George Kittle was their most valuable weapon in the run game and in the pass game. He had 4 catches for 96 yards, including 2 big catches of over 30 yards in the game. But with no running game, an elite running game to go at Dak, you're not going to win, Cowboys fans. It's not going to happen because he's not that quarterback. And it's too damn hard to win now when you are saying, you know what, me against you. Cincinnati's had a banged up O-line for 2 years. Doesn't matter because they got Joe Burrow. He's a stud of studs. To me, fundamentally, he might be a better quarterback than Mahomes. Just when it comes to straight fundamentals. Yes, Mahomes is more of a threat moving out of the pocket and things of that nature. But Burrow just playing quarterback, he might be the best. He's so damn good. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is playing great football this year. He's in the MVP conversation. Dak hasn't been in the MVP conversation really since his rookie year. That was a long time ago. It was 2016. It's 2023 now. He's still with the Cowboys, and they still haven't got to an NFC championship game. And it's not like he's been playing in a tough division. The division's only starting to get difficult now. 3 teams that made the playoffs this year. And the football team was just on the outside looking in. It's an interesting offseason for Dallas because Dan Quinn is interviewing for jobs. He's a former head coach. He's a head coach in Atlanta. He's had a very good defense the past 2 years in Dallas. He didn't take a job last year. I just don't see that many candidates. I think he's going to get a job. I think he will be a head coach in the NFL next year, so I think he's gone. Kellen Moore, I think that's just a bad decision waiting to happen. If somebody was to hire him as a head coach, I think that's a Nate Hackett written all over it. But somebody's going to be hired for these jobs because I'm not sure Sean Payton's going to take a job. I'm not sure Sean Payton's going to get back into coaching. Seems to like Fox with that hairdo he had yesterday in that 7-man panel. God. But you could lose both coordinators, have Mike McCarthy, and you have to fill that void. Look at all the offensive coordinator jobs available right now. They're everywhere around the league. So Dallas might have to do that, and they might be late to the party because teams are interviewing people already. Now, if I'm a team, I'm not hiring Kellen Moore, but again, teams do stupid stuff all the time. I could see it happening. So Dallas could be looking at 2 coordinators. DeMarcus Lawrence is a free agent. They're going to make decisions on Zeke. Dorrance Armstrong had a great year. He's a free agent. I don't think they're going to be able to afford him. I think he's going to go to another team, kind of Randy Gregory-esque, because he went to Denver. I still think their defense will be good, but Leighton Vander Esch was on a 1-year deal. So does he want to continue to play football? Will they bring him back? I think he's an important player to that defense. But they got some decisions to make. Because as good of a season as they had, they finished second in their division. Philly was first. Philly's going into the championship game, not Dallas. So it's one thing to say, well, we need to get better here. You need to get better in your division. You need to get better so you don't have to go to San Francisco on the road. Dak will be back. Does Tony Pollard return? Mike McCarthy's back. Jerry Jones said that after the game. But just looking at last night, I thought the play calling was pretty pedestrian. They didn't take any big chances. And I like their team. I do. Quite honestly, top to bottom, I think Dallas is better than Philly. I think their defense is a little better than Philly. Offensive line-wise, you're going to take Philly's. It's the best in the NFL. But Dallas, their pass rush and the way they play defense, it's right there. I think they got a better defense than Philadelphia. I think they're a better top-to-bottom team than Philadelphia. So I think they're kicking themselves saying, if we would have played Philly, we would have got past this game. We would have been in the Super Bowl. I don't disagree with them. They'd be an underdog heading to Lincoln Financial. But if I'm a gambling man, I'd be taking the Cowboys plus the points. But they're done. Another year for the Cowboys not to win anything. 1995, the last time they won a Super Bowl. The last time they made a championship game was in 1995. I got to tell you, if you're a person that roots for the Cowboys and roots for the Toronto Maple Leafs as a pair, that's got to be a tough existence. My adjective for that is just pain. I don't know how you do it. I mean, that's tough to root for. I mean, first thing, you're rooting for chalk. And if you don't know what chalk is, that means you're just rooting for favorites, rooting for hopping on the bandwagon of popular teams. And then they never win anything. That's got to be tough. That's got to be a tough. But, hey, all the power to you. There's always next year, as you say to every team that doesn't win. But to me, the Cowboys threw away the game last night. They easily could have won that game. But credit to San Francisco, Fred Warner was the player of the game for me, either side of the ball. Had an interception, had 3 tackles for loss. He's always in the middle of that defense. He's running things. And D'Amico Ryans should be hired for that job that they're probably going to give to Kellen Moore. Give it to D'Amico Ryans. What he's doing in San Francisco with that defense. But impressive stuff from that defense. And Brock Purdy hasn't lost a game in his NFL career. It's becoming less and less funny. It's an obvious thing. And this is even an easier statement to make. If you had an option between Brock Purdy and Tom Brady for next year, I'm taking Brock Purdy. I'm not spending more money on Tom Brady. Easy. Give me Brock Purdy. He's still on his rookie deal. He's a 7th. He makes $800,000. Gets you an NFC Championship game with that coach. No way I'm overpaying for old man Tom Brady when I just got to an NFC Championship game. He couldn't win a playoff game. Please. The other NFC game featured the New York Football Giants and the Philadelphia Eagles. And this game did not go the way I expected. I haven't made a bet in 2023 yet. I wanted a break from gambling. It can get into your head. It can kind of consume you a little bit. And with my health and my mental state the way it is on normal days, I needed a break. So, but looking at it, and I said if I was gambling, I would have taken the Giants plus the points. I thought this was going to be close. It's a divisional game, and boy, was I ever wrong. The Eagles had not played in a while. Jalen Hurts had played 1 game in the last 5 weeks, and it was not an impressive game against this same New York Football Giants with the backups. But they came out and made a statement Saturday night, and it started on the opening drive. Hurts was 5 for 5. He had a deep shot down the field to Devontae Smith. He was 2 for 2 on 3rd down, clutch, and they finished it with a touchdown. The next drive, another touchdown. And the key thing here for Philly, I made a checklist of why they owned this game. It starts with the offensive line. It's hard to lose a football game when your offensive line is allowing your quarterback all kinds of time to make decisions. Jalen Hurts was sitting there in the pocket, and he could look around the field and find somebody to get open. Whether it be Dallas Goedert in the slot or underneath, going to Devontae Smith, find A.J. Brown over the top, check down to Miles Sanders. He could do whatever he wanted. Or with that offensive line pulling, he could keep it put it in his belly and run for a first down that way. Jason Kelce, Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson, who's so important to that line, returned from injury, was clearly hobbled, but he played throughout the game and he battled through it. They dominated this football game. The number one most important thing, they were the most physical team. Their defense was more physical, their offensive line, but it started on that first drive with that offensive line showing the physicality to their opponent. Second reason why they won this game, the RPO. Run pass option with Jalen Hurts. The Giants were trying to spy. They used McKinney early in the game that worked somewhat. But the RPO, because the run game was working with Sanders, with Kenneth Gainwell, and then you have Jalen Hurts that would keep it from time to time, and he just chewed them up for yards. The run game's working, the pass game's working. When you have a dual threat under center with all kinds of time to work, that's difficult. The Giants aren't a great defense to begin with, but Dexter Lawrence did not have an effect on this game because he didn't have an effect on the run game and trying to get to the quarterback. Like I just said, they couldn't do it. Offensive line was just beating them the hell. Massive holes, 3. That can be put on the offensive line, but also say, the Giants, who had James Bradbury at corner, who they cut last offseason, he's now in the Philadelphia Eagles. They could have used him yesterday. Bradbury had a really good season in Philadelphia. You look at him, the way he played. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who the Eagles got from the New Orleans Saints just prior to the start of the season. He led the NFL in interceptions. He got one in this game. He's a physical safety. And I just thought the holes that were there in the passing game and the running game were big. 4, Jalen Hurts was healthy. He looked healthy. He looked confident. He didn't look afraid to keep the ball, like I said, to run in the open field. He threw the ball down the field with ease. I mentioned that pass to Devontae Smith, throwing it to Dallas Goedert down the field. He looked healthy, and I'll put it this way. The Eagles, I think, have the most dynamic and the most difficult to cover 1-2 receiver pairing in the NFL with Devontae Smith and with A.J. Brown. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase are really good in Kansas City, but I will take this one too. Because A.J. Brown's that physical bruiser, but that can still run down the field and catch 50-50 balls. And then you have Devontae Smith, who's incredibly quick, can put him in the slot, you can put him on the outside, and he's just a really versatile player whenever he has the ball in space and he can make plays. So they have that 1-2 that can kill you. And then you have, to offset that, we got Dallas Goedert, who is, in Philadelphia, we went from Zach Ertz, who was so important to us winning a Super Bowl, a great tight end in his own right, to Dallas Goedert, who is awesome as well and even more athletic than Zach Ertz. So they have a great tight end. They got two great wide receivers, and their running backs are adequate. They don't pay them a whole lot of money, which is just as important. And then 3, I thought the pass rush was good for the Eagles. Fletcher Cox, Josh Sweat. They got to Danny Dimes. They got in his face. They made his life difficult. He was forced to throw passes while on the run because he was going to take hits. He was under pressure. He was never set the whole day, Dimes. Never was comfortable, and the Eagles made it that way. And top to bottom, this was just a dominating performance from the Philadelphia Eagles. They end up winning the game 38-7. And I think there was 2 statement wins this weekend, if you can make them before a championship game. Those were the wins by Philadelphia and Cincinnati. But the Eagles just physically dominated their opponents. They never made it a game. This game was over at halftime. In the first half, the Eagles had 20 first downs, 150 rush yards. They led 28-0. And they never let their foot off the gas. They never stopped playing tough, hard-nosed football. And they were the number one seed for a reason. They had a bye, and I think they wanted to send that message to the rest of the league, to Dallas or to the 49ers, who they will play this Sunday. Turns out to be San Francisco. It was the most dominating win of the weekend. And I think the biggest thing, you knew their offensive line is really good. Jason Kelsey's a Hall of Famer. Lane Johnson might be a Hall of Famer at the end of his career. You got great wide receivers. But you needed to see Jalen Hurts have a good game. See Jalen Hurts be healthy. And that's something that we saw this weekend that you can look at and say, you know what? Maybe they can beat San Francisco. Maybe they can get to the Super Bowl because of the health factor. Because we got Brad Barrett, because we got Darius Slay at the corners position, we got Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, we got Fletcher Cox, we got Josh Sweat. Our defense is really, really good here. Our offense is loaded. Like I said, we're going to get the 4 best teams playing this weekend, and the Eagles are a really, really good roster. They know how to play fundamentally tough football. And I think it'll be fun to see San Francisco and Philly and how they go about playing one another. Because San Francisco prides himself on being a tough team too. Look at Fred Warner. Look at Jimmy Ward, how he just decked. He decked Michael Gallup on that last play last night. They finish their hits. They play for keeps. Both these teams do. And can that San Francisco defense get to the Philly offensive line? Can you limit the production of the running backs? Can you limit the production of Jalen Hurts when he gets the ball and he keeps it on an RPO? Those will be the keys to the game. I know if I'm San Francisco, I have a spy on Jalen Hurts the entire game, and that spy is Fred Warner. Yes, he might be the middle linebacker. He's got to take out the middle of the field. Have help, have people come over. I want Fred Warner to keep an eye on Jalen Hurts at all times because he's one of the only people that can keep up with him. He's incredibly fast on defense. He has great closing speed, and you need that in this game. But I didn't expect to see this type of play from the Eagles this weekend, and they brought it. They played phenomenal football. For the Giants, this was a great season for them. They had their Super Bowl last week. They won a playoff game in Minnesota on the road. Daniel Jones, to me, I've mentioned this before. I'm not giving him a contract like Deshaun Watson or Mahomes, but a mid-level contract for a quarterback, I would do that. I think he's a good quarterback, not a great one. Saquon Barkley, still a very good player. He was healthy throughout the entire season. Again, I get worried about giving these running backs second contracts because of how many hits they take. But I'd negotiate if it's for the right price, I would do it. Otherwise, I might franchise tag Saquon Barkley, bring him back, and he'd play on the tag. Because I don't want to hamstring myself with contracts that I don't like. But Brian Daboll, he's a first-year head coach. You win a playoff game. You get to the Giants back into the playoffs. You get them relevant again. That's all you can ask for. Mike Kafka and Wink Martindale are both interviewing for head coaching jobs. I know Wink interviewed for Indianapolis yesterday. I think Kafka's interviewing for that same job today. So you could possibly lose a couple coordinators like they are in Dallas. Maybe things stay the same. I think that's Brian Daboll would love that to happen. I think there's a better chance that Kafka becomes a head coach than Wink Martindale. I think Wink Martindale, he's a defensive coordinator. That's what he is. I think he'll be back with the New York Giants next year. But this is a solid team. They need to spend some more money on weapons, obviously, on offense. Get some better wide receivers for Daniel Jones. I think their defense was fair. Another good pass rusher could really help this team as well. Dexter Lawrence can't do it all himself. But a very solid season for the Giants. To go as far as the Cowboys did, to finish third in your division and still make it this deep in the playoffs, nothing to be sad about. A really positive season in the Meadowlands, despite the way their season ended on Saturday night. Let's now go to the AFC, and I'll go back to yesterday's game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills. And coming in, the Cincinnati Bengals were 5.5-point underdogs in Buffalo. The Bills had just squeaked out a win against the Miami Dolphins. The Bengals had survived a tough division game against the Baltimore Ravens. And you had Joe Burrow versus Josh Allen. Joe Burrow, always confident guy, saying he's never an underdog. And he made that statement very clear on Sunday afternoon, because that was yet another beatdown yesterday afternoon where Cincinnati made a statement. Like the Eagles did, the Bengals went in with bad intentions and they made a statement on the Bills' behalf. I expected Joe Burrow to play well yesterday. I expected him to find Jamar Chase. I didn't expect him to find wide receivers so wide open, to find Hayden Hurst wide open, to find Jamar Chase in close windows. But to me, the biggest thing from the day for me was that Cincinnati defense, and they come alive come playoff time. Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard are not names that jump off the board. Von Bell is a guy who's been cut before in San Francisco. Mike Hilton was cut in Pittsburgh. You got Awuzie, who's a former Dallas Cowboy. They have a team full of guys that you just don't think about that often. But then you get to the playoffs and somehow they start to play phenomenal. Jesse Bates, to me, is the leader of that defense. He's their safety. He was one of their best players, one of the big reasons they got to the Super Bowl last year. He was awesome again yesterday. But you start the game, 2 drives, 2 touchdowns. On those 2 drives, they're averaging 7 yards a play. Burrow was just moving in the pocket. If he saw a guy come into his lane, he'd step up, find a guy down the field. He hit Tyler Boyd on a beautiful throw. He hits Hayden Hurst in the back of the end zone. Jamar Chase over the top. He was getting whatever the hell he wanted. And quite frankly, this game should not have been 27-10, because I think Jamar Chase caught a second touchdown, but the NFL still doesn't know what a catch is, so they didn't count it. But on offense, Cincinnati got whatever they wanted. The Buffalo defense under Leslie Frazier didn't have their best day. I thought they played way too soft coverage. You look at everything and guys were just wide open. Joe Burrow could find whatever he wanted. Find them in soft zones. He hit Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase then ran 7 yards in for the score. Joe Mixon. Again, you're protecting the offensive line a little bit. Joe Mixon had an awesome day on the ground. Samaje Perine, when he got the ball, they had success. So the Bengals established the run, because you look at it yesterday. Burrow threw 36 times, but they ran the ball 34 times. Joe Mixon ran 20 times for 105 yards. That's a 5-yard average. Perine ran 7 times for 33. That's a 4-yard average. Joe Burrow 6 for 31. That's a 5 yards per run average. You're going to win a lot of games doing that. Because Chase only had 61 yards. Hurst had only 51 yards receiving. Tyler Boyd had 1 catch. T. Higgins had 3 for 28. It doesn't look like an impressive day for Joe Burrow. But I thought he played fantastic, and that defense was awesome for Cincinnati. They allowed 10 points, 3 in the second half, to Josh Allen and the Bills. And their corners locked them up. They made some great plays, knocking a ball out of Gabe Davis's hands. Stephon Diggs had 4 catches for 35 yards. Not exactly impressive. It was check down Charlie for Josh Allen. He had to run the ball 8 times for 26 yards. Why? Because he got nothing else. He couldn't find anything. The run game wasn't working. The defensive line was better. He was getting sacked. And to me, the funny thing was he only threw 1 interception because he's been turnover prone lately. For Buffalo, missing Von Miller was a key piece of this. Ed Oliver's a good player, and Greg Rousseau from the U, very good player. But they're not Von Miller. Your best pass rusher was not in the game. You didn't have Damar Hamlin in the game, obviously. He was at the game, which is great to see. But he's your starting safety. You didn't have Micah Hyde. So the Bills were missing key players on defense that could have made this game a little more interesting. But I look at the two quarterbacks. Joe Burrow was a hell of a lot better. A hell of a lot better than Josh Allen. It wasn't even that close in the game yesterday. If you're having a draft, you're taking Joe Burrow 100 times. And I look ahead here at the Buffalo Bills, and I don't know, they're getting farther and farther away from competing. If you think about it, they lost last year in the divisional game. Same round, you could say, well, no, they did the same. Okay, I look at how the game went. You lost in overtime to Kansas City in the divisional game last year. You win the toss, you win the game. Fair enough? I think that's fair. You win the game and you would get the toss, you get a touchdown, you win the game. I think they would have. Kansas City won the toss, they win the game. Just how the cookie crumbles. This season you play a divisional game. This time you're at home. You were in Kansas City last year, so you're at home. Technically, you had a better regular season, and yet you lose, but you get destroyed doing it. You lose by 17 points at home, and this game was never close. To juxtapose that, Buffalo is down 17-7.5, and here's the key point of the game. They go on a 7-minute drive to start the half, but it ends in the red zone. The second time of the day, it ends in the red zone where you don't cash it in. He tries to make throws, nothing working, out of the end zone, passes knocked down. So you get all the way there, 7-minute drive, you have to settle for a field goal. What does Joe Burrow do? Oh yeah, he answers with his own 7-minute drive, but this time he ends it with a touchdown. He ends it with a touchdown drive of his own, not a field goal. The Buffalo Bills were never in this game. That field could never get excited. The Buffalo Bills fans could never get excited because that game was over early on. And every time you lose, you think, okay, well, we'll just get better. We'll do this. We'll tweak this. And for the Bills, you have to be excited because you have Josh Allen, so you have a really good quarterback. But I'll put it to you this way. The best you can do is, if you're a Bills fan, and say, we have the third best quarterback in the AFC. That's it. Josh Allen's not better than Joe Burrow. He's not better than Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if he ever will be. He looks more early Josh Allen in his career than he did last year. Dayball's in New York. He's not in Buffalo anymore. So Stephon Diggs is great, but you still haven't found a run game. You drafted James Cook early in the draft. You don't use him. You don't build a team that likes to run the football other than with Josh Allen. Your quarterback's your most important player, but other players can have an impact on the game too. And I think they're too Josh Allen dependent. They're asking him to do too much, and then he just underperforms. So it always has to be his fault. And when they win, it's awesome. Josh Allen, he's the best quarterback in football. Yada yada yada. Well, why not use the entire team? Why not build a team that can run the football and pass? Is that not an option? I just look at that as a fundamental failure by the Buffalo Bills and how they, roster construction. Where you ask him to be the hero week after week, and when he doesn't deliver enough. Because you give Justin Herbert a better roster and a competent coach that's not Brandon Staley, Justin Herbert could easily surpass Josh Allen the next year or two. Other quarterbacks come into the league, who knows? But for now, you look up and say, wow, Joe Burrow's better than Josh, and so's Patrick Mahomes. And he's lost to both of them in playoff games. They got to make decisions on pieces. Do you want to bring Matt Milano back? He's so important to your defense. Do you cut Micah Hyde after he's injured all this year? Sounds tough, but you got to make decisions like this with your cap and things of that nature. It's a cruel sport. Do you want to bring Gabe Davis back? He's great, but he's also really inconsistent. Your offensive line's getting a little old. They got really manhandled yesterday too. Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard had a pretty good day rushing the passer. But for the Bills, you're not getting closer, you're getting farther away. And that's a tough position to be in because you think you're close. They thought they were really close going into this season. And maybe if Vaughn was there and maybe if Micah Hyde is present, it's a different story. But I have a hard time believing that because I saw the way Josh Allen played in the 2 playoff games he played this year. And if Tua played a week ago, the Miami Dolphins would have won that game too. Because Josh Allen played like shit. He made mistakes. He tried to play hero ball, nearly caught up with him. And as I mentioned off the top, I picked Kansas City and San Francisco to get to the Super Bowl. I don't know. The Cincinnati Bengals look so poised and so ready to get there again. Joe Burrow's playing phenomenal. Those wide receivers are dialed in. Joe Mixon is ready. An offensive line that is compromised but played really well this weekend, including in the running game. Joe Mixon's playing. They're all so confident this time of year. McPherson didn't have a great year kicking in the regular season. He's turned it around here in the postseason like he did last year. But this team was an upstart team last year that was surprised to see them get to the Super Bowl. That's not them this year. This team carries a confidence, a bravado, a cockiness about them. They went into Buffalo yesterday and spanked them. Like a redheaded stepchild, they just whooped that team around. Never close, never a game. To quote LeVar Ball, never lost. And the way they're playing, the way their quarterback is moving around, I'd be really nervous if I was a Kansas City Chiefs fan because the Bengals look poised. They look ready to get to their second straight Super Bowl and win one, finally. The team playing Cincinnati will be the Kansas City Chiefs as they edged out the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend. This was an interesting game for a number of reasons, but the number one being that I thought Jacksonville could have won this game, but they screwed up. They really played around and they lost this game. Anytime you see the best quarterback in football go down, it scares you. And it should give you a sense that, holy crap, yes, Mahomes is hurt, but also we can go win this game. Because Chad Henne is not a bad backup, but he's also not Patrick Mahomes. And there's a difference there. Chad Henne, the former Jacksonville, the former Miami Dolphin quarterback, now in his late 30s. But you see Mahomes go down late first quarter. He's grabbing that ankle, clearly not feeling well, and he has to miss pretty well all of the second quarter. So you have an opportunity there. You have Chad Henne at quarterback. Let's stop them from having any kind of points, and we can grab a lead. We'll see what happens. No. How about after that injury, they go on a 98-15 play drive that results in a touchdown. So that's mistake number one. You can't allow that long of a drive with the backup quarterback at the helm. But to the Chiefs' credit, Isaiah Pacheco stepped up, and the Warrior himself, Travis Kelce, had 14 catches. 14 catches for the game, which is a new tight end record for most receptions in a playoff game ever. He also caught 2 touchdown passes for 98 yards for the day. But the Jacksonville defense played so soft coverage on him. They allowed him to get whatever he wanted. They didn't push him at the line of scrimmage. They didn't press. He just got whatever the hell he wanted. Made no sense to me what they were doing on defense with him. So those are 2 big mistakes of the game. And then I look at Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence played okay, but he had 2 throws that really turned the game for me. 2 throws to Christian Kirk on third downs that would have extended drives that he missed. He threw one that was behind Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk got a hand on it, but it was behind him and hit the ground. It was a 3rd and 4. And then it was a 3rd and 8. He had him wide open. He threw it over him over his head, and it was incompletion. So those two third down throws could have changed the game. You end up losing the game by 7 points. Either of those two drives could have kept going that resulted in touchdowns. You at least get to overtime. But Mahomes eventually did return. Pacheco ran for over 100 rushing yards. And the Kansas City Chiefs relied on Travis Kelce and Kadarius Toney down the stretch, who they got from basically nothing from the New York Giants, to will them to victory. Pacheco had 12 for 95, thought he ran for 100. Jerick McKinnon was used. He ran the ball 11 times, didn't run for much, 2-yard average. Toney had a first down. He also caught 5 balls for 36 yards. Those were all really important because a couple first down conversion catches. But Mahomes only threw for 195 yards. He went 22 for 30 for $195. Henne went 5 for 7 for 23 with a touchdown himself. To me, Jacksonville had an opportunity. You got the backup in for that time. You have a wounded Mahomes who clearly was not the same player, but he willed that team. He ran for a first down where he was clearly hobbled. He did everything in his power to win, and eventually they overcame it. So, with that being said, it was revealed after the game that Patrick Mahomes has a high ankle sprain, but he said in his interview with NBC that he'll be ready to play Sunday night. He will play against Cincinnati. He'll do whatever it takes to get in that game. Well, sometimes you can be in a game, but it's how you're feeling. What's your health like? For all we know, Joe Burrow is 100% healthy, or at least more healthy than Patrick Mahomes is right now. He doesn't have a blown wheel. And Joe Burrow's confident. He looks great. For Kansas City, you got Travis Kelce, but I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to play it the same way Jacksonville did. I don't think Travis Kelce will have 8 catches on Sunday. I don't think he'll get even close to 100 yards because I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals are going to allow Travis Kelce to impact the game that way. So that means you look around for Kansas City, you have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who had 1 catch. It was for a touchdown this weekend. You got Noah Gray, a backup tight end, who had a big catch in the game. Juju Smith-Schuster. But you're going to be relying on a lot of guys that haven't had a huge impact, that are not that savvy. And this is what was said before the season. Tyreek Hill is gone, but you don't have the type of wide receivers that can have the same impact as Tyreek Hill. So who will step up? And how does that Chiefs offensive line hold up with knowing that they have a wounded quarterback in front of them, or behind them, pardon me? Can Joe Thuney, can that offensive line that they spent a lot of money on win this year? Can they play better? It's interesting because Alex Kappa could be back for Cincinnati. Lyle Collins is out, but they might get another offensive lineman back for Cincinnati. For Kansas City, you need to hope that you can be healthy. But I will say for Kansas City, I thought their defense played really well too. L'Jarius Sneed at the cornerback position made some big plays on wide receivers. He did a decent job of covering Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram didn't have a massive impact on the game. They kept Travis Etienne to a decent roar. He ran, let's see here, 10 times for 62 yards. So that is a good game, but they didn't run the ball enough. They threw the ball 39 times for Jacksonville, which was far too many for my liking. They didn't run the ball 20 times. So I think for Cincinnati, you love that passing game, but the way that they ran the ball, I mean, here's the average. Etienne ran for a 6-yard average, Hasty for a 9-yard average, Trevor Lawrence 8, Christian Kirk had 1 rush for 18 yards. So if you're Joe Mixon, you're looking at that defensive line and starting to lick your lips at what you can do to this team. So much will be dependent on Patrick Mahomes and how he's feeling. 100%. It's just his health and what's it going to be like for him? How much effort, how much can he give in this game? I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to play. But to me, if Kansas City now is going to win, they're going to need a lot of people to step up and have really good games because Cincinnati's just playing that well, that confident. They're playing like the favorites. They're playing like they're going to be at home this weekend. The game's not going to be at Arrowhead. But I mean, it's fantastic because you get to see Patrick Mahomes versus Joe Burrow again. Patrick Mahomes has not beaten Joe Burrow in his NFL career. He's 0-3. Lost to him earlier this season. It's really something that you get this again. I'm not sure how this goes. I got the rest of the week to think about it. On Wednesday, Matt Wright will join me. It's early in the week, but we'll talk about these two games. We'll get into some other NFL topics. He'll join me Wednesday afternoon to talk all things NFL, and we'll give our picks and we'll talk about the gambling lines for the two championship games this weekend. But as I look at my two picks, I'm before the season I picked Kansas City, I picked San Francisco. It's nice to see both teams getting into the conference championship weekend, but I'm not sure both teams will escape it and both teams will get to the Super Bowl. Because a high ankle sprain, if Patrick Mahomes does not have movement to move around and make those crazy plays like he loves to do, it changes him as a quarterback. And Joe Burrow just fundamentally is playing so strong, I'm not sure the Chiefs can overcome it. We'll see, but it was a good weekend. We got conference championship games next Sunday, 4 p.m. on Fox. It will be the San Francisco 49ers in Philadelphia to play the Eagles. Then at 7:30, we got Cincinnati in Kansas City to play the Chiefs for the second straight year. I'll say this. I listened to some of the games yesterday. I don't always listen to live sporting events. I like the mute. It's just I enjoy the product more when I don't. I can listen to music or whatever. To me, I love Troy Aikman. He's always been my favorite when I'm watching an NFL game. Him and Joe Buck are great. I still think they're very good. But Greg Olsen is superb. Greg Olsen and Kevin Burkhardt are emerging as the best tandem in football. When it comes to calling a game, I think Fox has the best coverage. And it's unfortunate. Hopefully Tom Brady keeps playing because I don't think Tom Brady's going to be that great in a booth, quite frankly. I know Greg Olsen's really good. They're going to bump Greg Olsen for Tom Brady. There'll be Kevin Burkhardt and Tom Brady eventually. Greg Olsen doesn't deserve a demotion. He's done a really, really good job at providing some great coverage this year. It's not an easy thing to step in when Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are leaving, who have been doing it at Fox for such a long time at a really high level. They moved to the mothership. But I just want to laud them because I think they do the best job at calling an NFL game. That's really entertaining. It makes you want to keep watching it. So kudos to them for their job that they did this weekend in particular, but throughout the entire season. I think KB and Greg Olsen are the best in the game. But also Fox, a 7-man panel for a pregame, postgame, halftime. 7 guys. You got Jimmy Johnson, and you got Terry, and you got Strahan, and Howie Long, who's the best on that. Sean Payton, who's fine. You got, who else is on there? Who am I missing? Oh, yeah, Gronk. Gronk should not be on TV. Gronk is horrible on television. That halftime show, I had to point that out. 7 guys, halftime show? And Gronk making grunting noises, want to go bench press. Like, go kick your field goal with Adam Vinatieri, whatever the hell you're doing at the Super Bowl. But 7 people? Cut it down. Get rid of Jimmy Johnson. He's old. I get it. You got to go. I still think Jimmy's good on television. But if you're going to have 7 guys, somebody's got to go. Crazy Terry, is he going to go? They got to keep Strahan. Good Morning America, all this stuff he does. Although Good Morning America is on ABC, kind of counteracts the old Fox of it all, but it's another story for another day. 7 guys. No more Gronk. Enough 7 people panels. 7 is way too many people. Come on. God. Then CBS is a big panel too. They got 4. Matt Ryan joined the panel. I saw. I didn't even know. I didn't listen to that game of sound. Jim Nantz, Tony Romo. Don't do it for me like they used to. But just some observations from the weekend when it comes to people calling games. But fun stuff. No matter what, I think we'll get some news this week also on head coaching hires. I think we'll at least get a couple this week, potentially. The openings have been a couple weeks. They've been talking to a lot of people. I could see some getting finalized in the not-too-distant future. And there's also a rumor that Jeff Bezos might be buying the Washington Commanders, which I think would be great for the NFL personally. I got no problem with Jeff Bezos buying into a team. He's the richest man in the world, so he probably should. So, yeah, there's some interesting other news from the NFL there that Jeff Bezos could potentially be buying the Washington Commanders, or the Washington football team, as I like to call them, from that awful piece of shit, Daniel Snyder. So he might be gone from the NFL finally. Let's pivot to the UFC. This weekend, we had UFC 283 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And it was a really interesting event. It had its positives and its negatives for me, and let's go through it. So, a highlight of the night was Jamal Hill, light heavyweight, defeating Glover Teixeira and winning the light heavyweight championship. This was a really, you saw Jamal Hill in the cage break down crying. He realized he's got 6 children. He's been through a lot in his life to get to this point, beating one of the legends in the sport in Glover Teixeira and really just beating the living hell out of him. This was a dominating performance. This was a statement win for Jamal Hill, and he is now the light heavyweight champion of the world. And this is coming off all the controversy with Yuri Prohaska, who had to vacate the title because of a shoulder injury. He had to have surgery. He's on the mend. So Prohaska had to vacate the title. Then we had an interim fight at the final at UFC 282 in Vegas at T-Mobile at the end of December. We had a draw between Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz. A draw, nobody won the title, so chaos, just debacle there. Dana White scheduled this fight that same night, and now Jamal Hill is the light heavyweight champion of the world. And his punching was phenomenal in this fight. The way Glover Teixeira got him to the ground a few times, but he was never in a position to be submitted. I've never seen him look better in the ring. He went 5 rounds, which he had never done. He's been in 5-round fights, but they never went 5 rounds because he won the fight via a submission or via knockout. He went the 5 rounds. His cardio is fantastic, and he is a very much a worthy champion. So credit to Jamal Hill. After the fight, Glover Teixeira announced that he's retiring. He's 43 years old. He is from Brazil, left his gloves in the ring, and I've seen pictures of him after the fight. His nose was completely messed up. It was just, he's a tough son of a bitch. And I'll put it this way. He's going to be in the UFC Hall of Fame. He's the former light heavyweight champion. He's done a lot in this business. He's fought John Jones. He's been in the ring with a lot of great people. I felt this fight should have been stopped earlier. I felt this fight could have been stopped in the 4th round. I didn't feel it had to go to a 5th because Jamal was just beating the living hell out of Glover, and it wasn't all that close. There's another fight that was just like this, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it was, to me, this was something I was watching, and I'm like, this is enough, because it was tough to look at, tough to watch, and sometimes I think the corners have to throw in a towel on behalf of their fighter, and I'll touch on that more in a second. But Glover Teixeira will be in the UFC Hall of Fame, one of the greats of all time. We'll see him coaching for a while. Alex Pereira is somebody he works with. He was in his corner when Pereira won the title over Israel Adesanya. So we'll see what happens there. The co-main event, Brandon Moreno fought Davison Figueiredo for the fourth time, and this fight was actually stopped after the third round because Davison Figueiredo's eye was completely shut. Moreno had his best fight in his UFC career in this one. He moved around super well. He had great combinations with his jab and then going over the top with his hooks, throwing some body shots. Brandon Moreno captures his second flyweight title, beating Davison Figueiredo for the second time. And he's just a really, really good fighter. He's got a lot of ways that he can beat you. He submitted Davison. He wins this via stoppage. He targeted that area, and it worked out for him. Yeah, Brandon is the assassin baby, is a really, really good fighter, and he continues to get better. He continues to show people at the highest level. So congratulations to Brandon Moreno on that big win. After the fight, Davison Figueiredo announced that he will be moving up in weight class, sick of the weight cut for flyweight. But another solid fight there. The third fight of the main card, we had Gilbert Burns. He submitted Neil Magny in the first round. Not a big surprise to me. This booking didn't make a whole lot of sense when it comes to the UFC. I didn't love this booking because Gilbert Burns is a much better fighter than Neil Magny. And yes, Neil Magny can be a fan favorite. He's got the most wins in the history of the welterweight division, but Gilbert Burns is on another level. Gilbert Burns can knock you out. He can submit you. He's a beast when he gets you on the ground. He is so hard to deal with. And yes, he lost a couple fights, but he lost to Kamaru Usman, the best fighter in the history of this division, you could argue. And then he lost to Khamzat Chimaev in a very, very close decision that could have went either way. I felt Gilbert could have won that fight, but the UFC gave that to Khamzat. Oh, wait, no, I mean the judges gave that to Khamzat. Gilbert is right there in this division. But Neil Magny was not the fight to make, but I think they felt like they had to give him a fight at this card. Colby Covington, for whatever reason, wasn't fighting, even though he hasn't fought since last March. Jorge Masvidal is not fighting Gilbert Burns because he knows he wouldn't win that fight. He'd get his ass kicked. And we just seen Bilal Muhammad fight in October, so I imagine he wasn't all that excited to fight either. If I'm matchmaking, they got Leon Edwards and they have Kamaru Usman fighting in March at UFC 286 for the belt. To me, Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad could very well be the next fight. Bilal Muhammad, to me, should be in title contention. He should be fighting for the belt next. He's done everything that you want him to do. He's beaten everybody in the division. But if I'm the UFC, you want to have a fight in between, you want to have a really good fight on a card. Gilbert Burns versus Bilal Muhammad, a number one contender fight in the not too distant future, because Gilbert Burns did not take a whole lot of damage in this fight. I expect he could be ready to go sooner rather than later. That's what I would do. Gilbert Burns versus Bilal Muhammad, remember the name, and the winner of that fight gets the winner of Edwards versus Usman down the line. Because you look at it, Usman's number one. Covington is currently ranked number two, but his last fight was against Masvidal. 3, you have Khamzat Chimaev. And you have Bilal Muhammad and Gilbert Burns. The UFC can go a couple of different ways. Maybe they go Chimaev versus Bilal. The winner of that gets a title fight. That's where I think they'll go, now that I think about it, which I'm all for that fight. I think Bilal will fight Khamzat. I don't think he's afraid of him whatsoever. That's if Khamzat wants to stay at the welterweight division, if he wants to move up, potentially, to middleweight, because I know he said he wants to fight Alex Pereira. But you could go Chimaev versus Muhammad, which would be great, and you go Burns, Covington. It's an interesting division right now, but Covington hasn't fought in forever. He needs a fight. Gilbert Burns would be a good one, but I would also love to see Khamzat and Bilal get in the cage with one another. But they got some options there at welterweight. Jessica Andrade dominated Lauren Murphy in the second fight on the main card. And this was a fight that this could have been called after the second round. This could have been called after the first 10 seconds of the third round. And the referee, who seemed just completely out of it, I don't know what the hell he was doing in this fight, or Lauren Murphy's corner, even though she said after the fight she's happy that her corner didn't throw the towel in, they should have. This was just malpractice. She was getting the hell beaten out of her by Jessica Andrade. It was a no contest. This was nowhere close. It was ugly to see what was happening in the cage. No reason for this fight to continue. No reason other than just further damage to Lauren Murphy. I hate seeing that. Throw in the towel. These corners. Like, your fighter's not going to come back and win. They're being decimated in their fight. You're not going to find a way to come back and win the fight on decision, and they're not going to beat this person. So just take it and move on. It's frustrating to me how some of these corners and the referees handle this, but make better decisions in the future. And then the first fight of the main card, Johnny Walker, one of my favorites. He's another light heavyweight. He knocked out Paul Craig with just an incredible right hand, where Craig had a hold of Walker's leg. He comes over the top, smashes him with a right hand, hits him again. Craig goes down, and Johnny Walker has earned back-to-back knockouts. And he will jump up inside the top 10 of the light heavyweight rankings, grabbing Paul Craig's ranking, I imagine. So now, at light heavyweight, Johnny Walker's an interesting name, for sure. He's a guy that I think fans love to watch. I know he's one of my favorites to watch because he's unorthodox style. He's exciting. You got Anthony Smith. That would be an interesting fight at light heavyweight. Anthony Smith's looking for a fight. I know he was interviewed on the MMA Hour just at the end of 2022, and he said he wants a fight early this year. Obviously, he was the backup for the title fight, so he could be ready to fight sooner rather than later. Johnny Walker just won this fight in the first round and didn't take much damage. So it would just be about the training camp at that point. But these two could go, say, at the April card. That could be something the UFC could look at with Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker at that April card. As I just look at the light heavyweight division, you have Prohaska, who's number one. Obviously, had to vacate the title. Glover retired. Magomed, I think, is still looking for a title shot. Jamal Hill is the champion. Alexander Rakic is another name. He's coming back from injury. I think we could see Rakic and Jan Blachowicz run it back because that fight was ended prematurely. Anthony Smith versus Johnny Walker, that could absolutely work. Then you have Ankalaev in there maybe fighting for the title before Prohaska returns potentially later in the year. But some options, we also saw the Bonifim brothers, two men who made their debuts in the UFC, both won their fights in incredible fashion. Ismail KO'd Terrence McKinney in just a brutal knee to the skull knockout. Terrence McKinney, who's a knockout artist himself, he dropped like a sack of potatoes in front of a Brazilian crowd. And then later in the night, his brother Gabriel wins his UFC debut in under a minute with a guillotine. So the brothers are in the UFC. The both of them look confident. They look cocky, and just impressive stuff from those brothers. But it was interesting. I didn't like that they didn't stop those fights, but an interesting pay-per-view nonetheless. And nice to see some guys. You're seeing real improvement. You know, I mentioned Johnny Walker. I mentioned Jamal Hill, and just seeing his improvement from fight to fight. Brandon Moreno, and now Gilbert Burns with him winning. There's so many options the UFC could go with, and just getting people to fight is the toughest thing. Whether Masvidal will fight, whether Covington will fight, get these guys to sign some contracts and get some fights going. To the National Hockey League. Bruce, there it is. I don't even know how to start this conversation. I talked about the Vancouver Canucks a lot last week, and I don't want to bring up all the same points again. But it got into new levels of stupidity this weekend where the Vancouver Canucks played 2 games, Friday night and Saturday night. Friday night, they hosted the Colorado Avalanche, and Saturday, they hosted the Edmonton Oilers. And on Friday, it was leaked, it was reported, Bruce Boudreau somehow knew that he would be coaching the next 2 nights, and then the team would be relieving him of his duties, and Rick Tocchet would be introduced as the new Vancouver Canucks head coach on either Sunday or Monday. So the team played Friday night. I watched the first period and a half of that game. They played extremely hard, but Colorado's the better team. Colorado is starting to come alive, and they end up losing. And Bruce said the team played hard, but we just didn't have enough. And he said to the media, hope to see you guys tomorrow. Jokingly, but not so jokingly. And then we get to Saturday night, and during the intermission of the Montreal Canadiens and Toronto Maple Leaf game, Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts said that Rick Tocchet would be introduced as soon as tomorrow as the new Vancouver Canucks head coach. So this is before the game is supposed to start. It's concrete. It's 100% locked in. So then they go play the game. They lose to the Edmonton Oilers, and we hear that there's reporting after the game. Bruce is having a beer in his office with his staff. Every player comes in individually to shake his hand and thank him for everything. Just truly one of the most weird situations that I've come across. But also during the game, there was a Bruce there it is chant. He got emotional behind the bench. And then there was a fan in the stands that had "We Stand with Bruce," and the staff nearly kicked him out of the arena Saturday night. So now we're here on Monday afternoon. Rick Tocchet is the new head coach, and it's January 23rd. They're paying Rick Tocchet $2.75 million this season. They're paying Bruce Boudreau $2 million this season, and they're paying Travis Green $2 million this season. So almost $7 million to 3 coaches, and only one is coaching, just to make that very clear. I've never seen something handled this way. So unprofessional, so wrong. And Jim Rutherford came out yesterday and said he learned he just needs to shut the hell up, which that's a start. But I have a couple thoughts. It's January 23rd, and he was asked by the media yesterday, why aren't you tanking? And he responded, well, I thought we were. Well, you're bringing in a new head coach mid-season. Why is that? Normally when a coach is brought in mid-season, it is because the team had playoff aspirations and you're not meeting or you need to make a desperate move to see if you can win. Dan Bylsma was fired mid-season. Mike Sullivan was brought in. Michel Therrien was fired mid-season. Dan Bylsma took over. Those 2 teams won the Stanley Cup. Craig Berube was brought in mid-season for Mike Yeo. That team ended up winning a Stanley Cup. So it's teams that had aspirations. This Vancouver Canucks team was going nowhere before the season. They're going nowhere now. They are going to be sellers. They've admitted that they have to have major surgery on this roster. And they have no reason to get better this year. But normally with a new coach, you get a new coach bump, you get a new coach feel, and before you know it, this team could be winning games. They could be better than you expect. So the tank for Bedard scenario might not be a realistic one. This new coach hiring might give this team energy. It might give them something because they've been in just this quicksand for so long knowing that Bruce is leaving. But they have nothing to show for it. They have 39 points in 46 games. They only have 2 more points than the San Jose Sharks. They are a very bad team. And yes, Anaheim and Chicago and Arizona and Columbus are all worse than these Vancouver Canucks. But what if you start winning a couple games? What if you start having better cohesion with the team and you could have the 2nd pick in the draft or even the 1st and you end up getting the 6th pick in the draft? What's the point of that? Wouldn't Rick Tocchet rather work for TNT, get hired in May, work for TNT the rest of the regular season, then take over this roster with potentially Connor Bedard at his disposal? Wouldn't that be a better job for Rick Tocchet than to get pick number 6, who I'm sure will be a good player because it's a deep draft, but I just don't understand the reasoning. I don't understand the thought process. All of this in Vancouver does not make sense to me. But Jim Rutherford, the way you handled this business was really unprofessional. It was the worst way you could have handled this situation. I hated the way he did it. I think he did it really nonchalantly. And he didn't act like it was a big deal. He didn't act like Bruce Boudreau was a respected head coach. Rick Tockett's been a head coach in one place. That was in Arizona. He never made the playoffs. I like Rick Tocchet. I think he's a good coach. I think it's a good hire. I'll point that out. In particular for a team that's not going to win anytime soon. Because he builds character and he builds a backbone with the teams he goes on. But you're not bringing in Jacques Lemaire to coach a team. This isn't a guy, he's won 2 cups as an assistant coach, but not as the head dog. Vancouver's got a lot of work to do, but that's on Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, and all these people that I don't even know what they do. Allvin's the general manager, but does he have any say on this team, or is it just Jimmy Rutherford? Good luck to the Vancouver Canucks. I hope Bruce Boudreau finds another job. I don't know if he will. He's an older gentleman. People like him around the league. I think he's good in media. He worked for the NHL Network last year during the playoffs. I'm sure he'll have that job available to him if he wants it. If he wants to go work there with Mike Johnson, Jackie Redmond, and the crew, I think he'll be offered that job because I think people really like Bruce. But I don't know if we'll see him behind a bench again in a head coaching capacity. I think that's the only way he'll take a job. But I will say for a guy who's got so many wins, so well respected, so much success in Washington and Anaheim and Minnesota, if this is the way it goes out, I'm disappointed with Bruce because it should have been better than this. It should have been handled differently. He should have been given a fair shake, and he never was. He was brought in to replace a coach, and now he's being replaced again. It's not because of him. It's because this roster wasn't good enough, and I think the expectations internally were clearly crazy. They weren't realistic. They weren't looked at and said, okay, this is our team. You were with rose-colored glasses and expecting a miracle. Sometimes you can't make chicken salad. You got to make chicken shit. And that's what this team is. The team's a chicken shit team. With players who don't give a fuck, and Jimmy Rutherford, who's handed out bad contracts. JT Miller, Brock Besser, Connor Garland. You did that. It's not all the old regime now. You've been there long enough. You've gone through coaches. Hopefully Bruce is okay with this. Hopefully he's feeling better about it today. Because he's a good coach, and I wish him all the best. Speaking of teams that are tanking, the Montreal Canadiens, whether they want to or not, are officially in tank mode. Because they've announced over the last week or so the following injuries. Jurek Slafkovsky's out 3 months, meaning he's likely done for the season. Jake Allen, done for the season. Cole Caulfield announced Saturday morning prior to the Leaf game, done for the season, shoulder surgery. Brendan Gallagher's out for a period of time. Jonathan Drouin is out with an injury, which is actually a positive, helped the team win. But they have a lot of players out of the lineup. They're wounded, and now they sit in a position where they are tanking for Bedard, and they'll be waiting to see if they'll find the lottery ball to win it. Maybe they're in tank mode like the Vancouver Canucks. Like I said, at least Montreal has a game plan. At least Montreal has some pieces. They are currently last in the Atlantic Division with 43 points. When it comes to overall standings in the league, they are at 32nd currently is the Columbus Blue Jackets. 31st, Anaheim Ducks. 30th, Chicago Blackhawks. 29th, Arizona Coyotes. 28th, San Jose. 27th, Vancouver. 26 is where we get to Montreal. Montreal and Ottawa are tied with 43 points. Montreal has played one more game. Obviously, Montreal beat the Toronto Maple Leafs on Saturday night in a valiant comeback. They always seem to find a way to play really good hockey against Toronto. That's besides the point. For Montreal, they're going to lose a lot of games down the stretch here because they're not going to have the roster. Samuel Montembaum's played fantastic for them this season, but they want to be in that Bedard sweepstakes. They want to be in that to hopefully land him. In the worst case, maybe you get Adam Fantilli. Maybe you get the Russian kid, who I really like, but people don't like him now, apparently. I see every time there's negative stuff reading about him, yet he was a generational talent 2 years ago. Funny how that works. Think about where he's from. Think about his contract. Maybe that's why. Maybe that's why it's written that way. But Montreal is a very good roster. They have pieces that can work. I don't think this is a full-scale rebuild. I think this team is in much better shape than the Vancouver Canucks. They're going to make deadline moves. They're going to trade Joel Edmondson. Certainly, I think they could look at trying to move a Josh Anderson off this roster, who I think will have value to certain teams. I doubt they can get rid of a Brendan Gallagher because he's constantly injured and he doesn't have any value. That's a horrible contract that Mark Bergevin has signed him to, another legacy deal that just bombs him in the face. Nobody's taking Jonathan Drouin off your hands, unfortunately. You might be able to trade Mike Hoffman. So I expect Montreal to be a big-time seller at the trade deadline and building for the future. But whether you like it or not, now that these injuries are put in place, now that your team is wounded, now that you have an entire American Hockey League line with Harvey Pinard and Remy Pitlick on this team, you are in seller mode. You are in tank for Bedard season. And quite frankly, I have no problem with it. It's happening in the NBA and in the NHL this season right there, right alongside one another. Because in the NBA, there's this French kid named Victor Wembanyama that everybody wants. Generational talent, everybody says. I've seen Connor Bedard play a lot of times live. The kid's a generational talent. Teams should be tanking for him. Philly, Montreal, all these crap teams lose games. You should all be thinking about is losing right now. And putting yourself in the best position to land this franchise changer. For Montreal, it will change a lot. You have Caulfield who come back. You got Nick Suzuki, who I like a lot. To me, gets better. I thought he played great Saturday night against the Maple Leafs. But to get another piece of the puzzle with Connor Bedard in that mix would be awesome. You have a lot of competition with teams that are trying to be worse than you. Montreal has put their hand in the proverbial ring. And finally, we got tough news on Friday. We learned that Max Pacioretty suffered his second torn Achilles in 6 months, and he is now done for the season after playing under 10 games. He had just come back from a torn Achilles. He tore it again, and this is a big blow for Carolina, who acquired him in the offseason because they viewed him as a top 6 winger that would be a huge part of their playoffs and a key contributor down the stretch. But now he goes on LTIR. That money comes off the books, and they'll be looking to upgrade that position. And I think Carolina's will be aggressive. Certainly. You got to look at Bo Horvat. I think they'll try to put themselves in the mix. Patrick Kane has to accept it, but would Patrick Kane go to Carolina? He's another winger. He's different than Pacioretty. They might want another bigger type winger on this team. But you want to be creative. You want to find a guy that can fill that role who's played in the playoffs before. But if I'm Carolina, this season is when I'm aggressive. You've been in the mix for a long time where you make the first round or you get the second round and lose. Enough of that. You need to find a way to break through. You need to find a way to get there. Because you're not in the Atlantic Division. You don't have to play Tampa or Boston. You're likely going to win your division, but New Jersey's right there with you. But you look at it, if you're Carolina, you're saying, we're better. We're better than New Jersey. We're better than Pittsburgh. We're better than Washington right now. Whoever we play in that wild card slot will be better than them. We had a tough opponent last year in Boston. Our biggest concern likely is New York. They beat us last year. Let's see if we can beat them this season. Hopefully Freddie Anderson is healthy, which good luck with that. But maybe he'll be able to play, maybe he won't quit like he does every other year. He'll stand in the net. If not, we got Porchkov, who's in the American League right now, but is a stud in his own right. So I think they should do everything they can to try to improve their team. Get another winger like Max Pacioretty. Get another defenseman if you need one. Just really improve this roster because you are in the prime slot to get to a conference final, and you'll play the winner of Tampa, Boston, or Tampa, and they will be wounded from playing one another. They'll be spent, and hopefully you have some easier series, and you're ready to go. And you could sneak your way into a Stanley Cup final, and then you have a 50% chance of winning. That's how I'd approach this. If I'm the Carolina Hurricanes, that's the way I look at this situation is we are in a perfect position here this season. Yes, there's good teams in the East, but in the Metro, there are good teams that have a lot of flaws. New Jersey's a really good team, but they're really small, and we feel our goaltending is better than theirs. We can physically beat them up, and our goaltending can withstand a series more than Vanacek can. Pittsburgh's a very good team. Yes, we like them, but they're inconsistent. There's something about them that's just not working. Washington's old. They're always constantly injured. How are they even in the mix? New York, yes. Okay, we don't want to. We'll play them once. Hopefully, we can squeak it out. Maybe they get upset. That's perfect, best case scenario for us. But Carolina's always been a team that's been afraid to spend money, that's afraid to kind of push all their chips into the middle of the table. That needs to end this year. Make an aggressive move. Go over the top and beat out a Toronto or a Boston or a Tampa for a big player. Because you are right there with them when it comes to the beasts of the East. The way you play night in, night out is arguably the best other than Boston in the entire NHL. Carolina night in, night out is a better team than Toronto. It's a better team than Tampa Bay. They just don't get talked about because they're playing Carolina. But they never lose themselves either. They've lost 9 games in regulation all season long, the Carolina Hurricanes. Crazy stuff. But if you find somebody that you really like that you want to add to your team, go get them. Go get them because this is your season to pounce. Because before you know it, Jordan Staal is going to retire here. And yes, you might say, it's only Jordan Staal. Jordan Staal is really important to that team. He's got 12 goals this season, and he's the anchor of their penalty kill. Before you know it, Jacob Slavin will be up. You got to pay him. You got Brett Pesce that you got to work through. Svechnikov, Aho, get a little bit older. Frederik Andersen's deal is done at the end of this season. Him and Antti Raanta are both free agents. Who's going to come in to be a backup? You got to bring in new goaltenders. You got to find new defense. Again, your roster can change quickly. So when you see an opportunity, when you see a window, jump on it. Jump on it and get some good pieces to add to your team. Call the Chicagos. Call the Columbuses. Call Philadelphia. I mentioned the Konechny trade. That would make a hell of a lot of sense for a Carolina Hurricanes team if you call them and say, can we get Travis Konechny? He's like Pacioretty, but he's got better hands. He's a more physical player. Make the calls. Make a deal happen. I don't think anybody expected Brandon Hagel to be traded to Tampa Bay last year, but it happened. They're on the phones and you work out these deals that you don't expect to see, but somehow they end up happening. It's a hard cap world. It's a difficult system. I understand that. But when you have cap space like the Carolina Hurricanes, like the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to have with Jake Muzzin because of LTIR, take advantage of it. There's no complaining about it then because guess what? You have an injured player and you're able to benefit from his injury. Forever, Tampa was the only, Tampa's cheated. They won a Stanley Cup. No, they didn't. Tampa worked the system and they won. The people that complain that these teams do it consistently, do it well, because they aren't working the system well enough. They aren't figuring it out. They aren't keeping a player out the extra 2 weeks before the end of the regular season because we got to get him in for a game. No. Work it. Use it to your advantage. Carolina, Toronto, Edmonton. Find some players. So that's where I look at. But I look at Carolina. Yes, it's a bad injury that you lose Max Pacioretty, but it's not the end of the world, and be aggressive to get better again. You can make trades in the offseason. But if you can get a Travis Konechny to add to this roster, do it. Do it. Not call these other teams that have players that are good. Make a blockbuster. Give up a couple first-round picks. Who cares? Because guess what? You're hoping you're picking 32nd. And if you're picking 32nd in the draft, that means it's a second-round pick. Yes, it's technically a first round, but it's a late first. It's a second-round pick. They're not playing next year. They're not playing for 3 years. They might never play ever. Konechny is playing in the NHL, and you're trying to win a cup. Be a winner, not a loser. Tonight, in the sports world, Leafs Islanders play this evening. Should be an interesting game. Rangers, Panthers. Panthers have been on a bit of a heater lately. They're at MSG. Sabres are in Dallas. You got Columbus playing the Calgary Flames. Johnny Gaudreau's return to Calgary this evening, so I'm expecting to see a lively crowd there. Full slate of NBA action tonight. You also got the Australian Open, which has been full of upsets, full of chaos. The only constant, Novak Djokovic, is still in the field. He wins last night with a big win for himself. You had Iga Swiatek, the number 1 seed, go out this weekend. You had Coco Gauff lose. So tonight you have Elena Rybakina and Yelena Ostapenko. Rybakina won Wimbledon last year. Ostapenko is a former French Open champion. Then later in the night, you have Jessica Pegula playing Victoria Azarenka. Pegula, the last American woman remaining in the draw. On the men's side this evening, we got a couple good ones. Khachanov and Sebastian Korda, the young American man. And then we have Stefanos Tsitsipas, and you got Novak Djokovic and 2 unranked American men in the other quarterfinal. So quarterfinal days, the next couple at the Australian Open. We'll keep you updated on that. We'll recap the NHL action tonight and the other top news and notes around the sport on tomorrow's program, where Seamus Fillmore will join me for his weekly Tuesday hit. So until then, have a great rest of your Monday, everybody, and we'll talk tomorrow here on To The Point.